Chapter 12. The Sold Rope. "Paul," whispered Grandpa in the low voice he used when children and wild animals were asleep. "Paul, boy." At the sound of Grandpa's voice, the phantom neighed. Misty scrambled to her feet, swayed, and then slid awkwardly along the floor of the truck. With a hungry little bleat, she found her mother's side and began nursing. Paul opened his eyes, then quickly shut them. If this were a dream, he wanted to spin it out and make it last until the end of time. He wished Grandpa's voice would fade away, but it kept pricking him awake. "Come, boy, Grandma is nigh crazy with worry over ye. The big pine tree fell atop the house last night, and the Atlantic Ocean wetted our dooryard. I just couldn't come for ye till now." Paul pulled himself up. His muscles ached. He could feel the wide strips made by the boards of the truck across his back. He looked down at his long expanse of bare legs and suddenly remembered that he was wearing nothing but Grandpa's jacket over his underwear. He grinned at Grandpa. Grandpa winked back. "I see you scamped my belongings," he chuckled. "It's any port in a storm, lad?" Then he thought of his message. "Grandma's mixed some goose grease with onion syrup for ye. You're apt to catch a terrible fever," he quoted Grandma, but all the while his eyes were fondling the dam in her coat. "She says you've got to come home and go to bed." Paul felt the stickiness of his hand where the phantom had nuzzled it. His voice tensed. "I can't leave, Grandpa. Today's the sale. We got to buy the phantom and Misty. Marine can tend to that while ye get some sleep. I don't know what in thunderation made me protect that little feller for ye last night. I must be gettin' addled in my old age. Now help me get the pair of 'em out of the truck and back into the corral so you can buy 'em legal-like at the sale." But there was no need for help. With the truck backed up close to the corral gate, the phantom flew down the ramp. She smelled the rain-washed grass, and she was crazy to get to it. Misty followed, a silver fluff of a shadow. The pony penning grounds were waking up when Marine rode in on watch eyes. Volunteer firemen were clearing the damage done by the storm. Trucks bearing licenses from Maryland, New York, North Carolina, and Washington, D.C. were beginning to line up close to the colt pens. A few children, their faces still flushed with sleep, darted here and there, talking to themselves. "That little black pony, I could name him Black Beauty." "I want the one with the white stockings." "How do you do, Marine?" called Tom, who on ordinary days was an oyster man. "You're up mighty early. Reckon you're sharpening your appetite for the big dinner this noon. Or maybe you come to buy my last 2 chances on the sorrel pony being given away Saturday." And with a great flourish he whipped the tickets out of his pocket. Marine could think of no answer. She was not interested in the sorrel pony, and she had forgotten all about the dinner to be served in the big dining hall on the grounds. She managed to smile at Tom and thank him politely. Then, feeling of the money pouch around her neck and the piece of rope over her shoulder, she stated her business quickly. "I came to see the fire chief," she said. "Nowhere's about. He's been and gone." "Oh. Anything I can do?" "Reckon not." "Well, he'll be back afore you can say Chincoteague Isle." Tying watch eyes to a tree, Marine wandered about the grounds waiting for the chief. She stopped at the colt pens and noticed that several of the shaggy-coated youngsters already wore sold ropes around their necks. She noticed, too, that most of them were beginning to eat for themselves. Only a few were whimpering for their mothers. The fire chief was right, she thought. They're learning to be grown-ups. She felt good towards the whole wide world as she walked towards the big corral. She watched 2 stallions fighting, dancing on their hind legs, lashing out with their forelegs. A news photographer was getting a picture of them. Finally, she climbed the fence and jumped into the corral. The wild ponies were refreshed by the rain. They thundered past and round her. They paid her no more attention than if she had been a small tree. She was nothing but an obstacle to avoid. She stood listening to the wild music of their hoofs. She liked to feel the little gust of wind made by their flying bodies. She liked the sight of their manes and tails frisking with the wind. The Pied Piper's band was on the far side of the corral. He was policing his family, keeping his mares in a bunch. Maureen saw Misty stretched out at her mother's feet. Her heart warmed at the sight of them. She walked over to them slowly. If she could slip the sold rope over Misty's head, it would save all the struggle later. The firemen had no time to ease up to the ponies. With 100 or more colts to sell, they had to work fast. Often 2 men had to pick up a pony by its tail and its head in order to fasten a sold rope around its neck. Meanwhile, the pony screamed and fought and struggled to get away. Probably it doesn't hurt, thought Maureen, but I'd like to save Misty all that scared feeling. Suddenly her eyes flew wide with horror. The phantom was tugging at a rope tied around Misty's neck. A sold rope! No, 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 Maureen shrieked. Phantom, she cried hysterically. You're the only one who can unsell her. Try harder, harder. Phantom was doing her best. With her big yellow teeth she was trying to sever the rope, but Misty would pull away, thinking her mother was playing. She opened her little colt's mouth, biting back, neighing fiercely. Maureen looked around helplessly. Just then she spied the fire chief coming towards the corral with Tom at his heels. She ran to them. Misty's wearing a sold rope, she cried. Misty's been sold. Then her voice failed her. Who's been sold? Asked the chief, puzzled. Who? Echoed Tom. Misty, she choked, trying to swallow her tears. The fire chief knotted his brows. Now, suppose you tell me who Misty is, he said kindly. Why, she's the Phantom's colt, and Paul and we've been saving for months to buy the Phantom, and now we want both her and her colt, and we have $102, she added breathlessly as she patted the money around her neck. Right here in Grandpa's tobacco pouch. And in 4 more months, we can save up another 100. I can go clamming, and I can catch soft-shell crabs, and Paul can shuck oysters, and Uncle Ralph will give us his night catch of fatbacks, and Paul and I can go up and down the streets calling fatbacks for sale, nice fatbacks for sale. Well, why in thunder didn't you kids tell me? Exploded the fire chief. Then his voice quieted. I'm sorry, Maureen. I didn't know. Why, less than an hour ago, a man by the name of Foster came through on his way to Norfolk. Had business there, he said, and he couldn't get back until after the sale. I asked Tom here to show him round, and he took a fancy to the filly's markings. He bought Misty, paid $50 down, nodded the chief. Insisted on buying the Phantom, too, just so the colt will get a good start in life. He took a deep breath. Tom and I, he added, tied the sold rope round the colt's neck, but it's going to take a lot more than 2 of us to handle that Phantom. Maureen watched the sun slide out from behind a low cloud and make diamonds of the raindrops on the grass. She turned her back on it. How could the sun shine when things went wrong? The fire chief clasped and unclasped his cane. I had no idea, he spoke quietly. If you had only said something about it yesterday. Maureen was about to leave, but Tom called her back. How about taking my last chances on the sorrel, he suggested. There's a gentle critter, and you'd still have $100 to spend on candy and things. Maureen raised her eyes to Tom's. Then she smiled at him through her tears. She felt sorry for Tom. Guess he'd never really wanted anything, she thought, as she slowly walked over to untie Watch Eyes. Chapter 13. A Pony Changes Hands. Paul took the news without a word. That all the sunburn suddenly washed out of his face, leaving it pinched and white. The day passed in a kind of dream. Both Paul and Maureen tried to stay away from the grounds, but something drew them there. Yet they no longer belonged to the happy crowds. They were onlookers now, like hungry people on the outside of a restaurant window. Sick with longing, they watched colts being tugged and pushed and lifted into waiting cars. Some went off in station wagons, some in trailers, some in dealers' trucks. Many of them squealed and kicked and fought. A few were too frightened to struggle. They stared fixedly as Grandpa bought a truckload of yearlings. "Soon we'll be gentling them for someone else," Maureen whispered sadly to Paul. The day that was to be so full of excitement dragged out. Even the merry-go-round with its brightly painted ponies and its brassy music did not help them forget. To Paul, the music kept wheezing, "You found and lost Misty. You found and lost Misty." To Maureen, it was a noisy mockery. "We'll have us another hoss family, just as purty, maybe purtier," promised Grandpa Beebe as they sat at table in the dining hall at noon. But Grandpa's words seemed bigger than his voice. The ladies of the auxiliary hovered over them anxiously, heaping their plates with oysters and clam fritters and great helpings of Chincoteague pot pie. "Land sakes!" exclaimed a motherly person to Paul and Maureen. "What's the matter with you two young'uns? Such puny appetites. Take my Delbert now. He's on the 4th helping." But try as they would, Maureen and Paul could not eat. The food that usually tasted so good lodged in their throats. Even Grandpa Beebe had no appetite. "If I didn't know 'twas plump oysters and rolled-out dumplings with chunks of chicken, I'd swear I was eating bran mash." In the afternoon there was the bronco busting. It was like any Wild West show, except there were no mountains in the distance, only fishing boats in the sea, and gulls flying and a soft wind singing in the pines. The wild ponies, crazed with fright, were let out of the chutes. While the crowds gasped and shrieked, the ponies crow-hopped. They bucked. They threw their riders at once, or tolerated them for a few seconds. The people cheered madly when an oysterman wearing a red baseball cap and holding a big unlighted cigar in his mouth stayed on his bronco for a matter of minutes, and just when he was doffing his cap and bowing to the crowds, the pony tossed him and his cigar and his red cap high into the air. An instant's pause, then such laughter went up as he recovered his cigar and pulled his cap over his face that it was heard by Grandma in the kitchen at Pony Ranch. Paul and Maureen watched, but they were not really part of the laughing, cheering crowd. Thursday night, Friday passed. The Pied Piper and all the broodmares except the Phantom were driven into the channel to swim back to Chincoteague for another year of freedom. It was Saturday before Paul and Maureen were able to talk about their loss. They sat in the dooryard taking turns grinding clams for Grandma. "If only I'd never gone on the roundup," Paul said bitterly. Maureen shook her head. "It was my fault. If only I'd gotten to the grounds at 4 instead of 5. If only I'd told the fire chief the night before." "What will we do with the $102? Maureen asked. A long silence was broken by the squeaking of the crank. "We could buy Grandma and Grandpa one of those electric toasters," Paul said at last, "and we could save the rest to go to college on the mainland when we get grown." "Let's do it," Maureen agreed, but without much enthusiasm. Later that morning, as they were looking at the electric toasters in a window on Main Street, they heard a man's voice call, "Hi there." They turned around to see a station wagon at the curb, with a man and a small boy in the front seat. The man leaned past the boy and poked his head out the window. "Can you tell us where the fire chief lives?" he asked. "Yes, sir," said Paul. "He lives up the 2nd Street, 3rd house from the corner. but I reckon he's still at the grounds. They're having the drawing on the sorrel this morning." The boy's head shot out of the car. "The drawing's over," he exclaimed, "and guess what?" "What?" asked Paul and Maureen. "I won the pony," he said breathlessly. "That's right," nodded the man, who did not seem to share the boy's eagerness. "And now we've got to see the fire chief. He went off in his car before we could find him. By the way," the man questioned, "do you know him?" Paul and Maureen managed to smile. "Everybody knows him," they said. The next moment they spied the chief's car turning in at a gas station on the opposite corner. "I'll get him for you," Paul said, and he ran across the street. Mused the chief as he limped back with Paul. "Looks to me like Foster, the man from Norfolk. Only before, he didn't have a boy with him." "Is he the one who bought Misty and Phantom?" Paul asked. The chief nodded. By now the man and boy had gotten out of the station wagon. "How do you do?" said the fire chief. "Good morning," replied the man. He took off his hat and began twirling it nervously in his hands. He cleared his throat. Then he pulled a clean white handkerchief from his pocket and wiped his forehead. "This is Freddie, my young son, and we—" He hesitated a moment, then hurried the words. "And we have a problem. You see, the other morning your man Tom sold us a chance on a pony, and I forgot all about it. That is," he laughed, "until this morning when I stopped off at the grounds to show Freddie the tiny foal I had bought for him." "Tell him, Daddy, tell him," interrupted Freddie. "Just as we stepped out of the car," Mr. Foster continued, "they were raffling off the sorrel colt, and—" "We won!" shouted Freddie. "No!" exclaimed the chief, and Paul and Maureen saw the tired look suddenly lift from his face. We won!" cried Freddie. "Now tell him the rest, Daddy, tell him." Mr. Foster spoke very quickly now, as if the sooner he told it, the better. "You see, sir, Freddie likes the sorrel pony because it's almost the color of my horse. He likes it better than the newborn foal." Paul and Maureen could hardly breathe. They were staring at Mr. Foster as if they could not believe what they heard. "Of course," Mr. Foster added, "I appreciate that pony penning day is over, and you might not have another chance to sell the little foal. In that case," he said, putting his hat back on his head, "in that case, why, we'll just have to hold to our bargain, though what we'll do with 2 colts and how we'll get that wild Phantom home has me worried." There was a long moment of stillness. An old man came along wheeling a cart of squash and watermelons. As the man went by, a dog lying in the doorway of the hardware store thumped his tail noisily. Still, the chief made no answer. Instead, he hooked his cane over Paul's shoulder. Then he took a notebook out of his pocket. Slowly, carefully, he began thumbing through it, reading notations on each page. Finally, he tore a leaf out of the book and took a $50 bill out of his wallet. Handing the money and the page of writing to Mr. Foster, he said, "There was a boy and a girl who had their eyes on the mare and her colt. I can't be sure," he said with a wink, "but I've a mind they might still be interested." Maureen gave a little gasp. Then she picked up the astonished Freddie and gave him a kiss. "Don't mind her," Paul said to Freddie. "It's just what girls do." Then he grabbed the fire chief's hand and wrung it until his own ached. He shook hands with Mr. Foster, too, and even with Freddie. At last he threw back his head like a spirited horse and let out such a loud whinny that it was heard the full length of Chincoteague Island. Chapter 14. The Wickie. Usually, a colt learns from its mother. It hears her nicker at the sound of man's voice. It sees her gallop to meet him when he comes down to the corral. It sees her lip at man's hand. Soon the colt discovers that man represents the good things of life, delicious surprises in the way of sugar, carrots, and apples. And presently it is trying to please man too, not only to be rewarded with something to eat, but to enjoy the tingly feeling of his hand or the pleasant sound of his voice. With Phantom and Misty, things happened the other way around. Misty accepted human beings from the start. Their hands felt good to her. She would brace herself, her forelegs splayed out, while Paul or Maureen gently stroked her face or traced the white blaze on her face. She would lean toward them, asking in the only way she knew that the attentions never stop. Whenever they brushed her foretop or her mane, she lowered her gold eyelashes as if dreaming the most wonderful dreams. "I declare," chuckled Grandpa, "that Misty reminds me of a girl getting all dressed up for her first dance." Never was a colt more curious. A Wickie was something to be investigated. First, she nosed it. It tickled her colty whiskers and made her sneeze. Sneezing was fun, and one day, without knowing how it happened, she was wearing the Wickie round her neck. It did not hurt. It did not hurt at all. Paul and Maureen were at the other end of it, and they were singing softly, "Come along, little Misty, come along." Misty moved a step toward them, her ears pricked as if to catch her name. In wonder of wonders, she was rewarded with a lump of sugar as she walked along. When Phantom saw that Misty was not being hurt, she would come forward too. Nervously, she would take what was offered and then back away, a safe distance behind her colt. Grandma often came out to watch, with a dish of apples to pare or an armful of clothes to patch. "This be the topsy-turviest pair I've ever seen," she used to laugh softly. "Instead of the colt following its mommy, it's the other way round." It was days, however, before the Phantom would let anyone touch her. The mere placement of a hand upon her coat acted like an electric shock. She would bolt away, snorting in fright. But as August wore on, the horseflies became so vicious that she turned to Paul and Maureen for help. "She's missing the surf," Paul said, as they watched her trying to shudder her coat to drive the flies away. But the flies seemed to stick faster, drawing blood until Phantom was crazy with pain. They watched her sidle up to the other ponies on the ranch to get the benefit of their swishing tails, but the other ponies bunched up and ran away from her. She tried standing head to tail with Misty, but Misty's tail was so short and floppy that it was not much good. Finally, when she was almost exhausted, she let Paul and Maureen flick the flies for her. She would offer first one leg and then the other. And before the fly season was over, she had learned to shake hands like any circus pony. Riding Phantom was quite another matter. Yet it, too, came about so gradually that she was quite unaware how it happened. First, Maureen made a wide girth out of an old bedsheet and fitted it round Phantom's body immediately back of her forelegs. Once Phantom discovered she could gallop just as fast with a band around her body, she no longer minded it. Next, Paul fastened a small sack of sand to the girth. Phantom tried in vain to buck it off, but at last she seemed to realize that she could run as fast as ever with a sack on her back. After that, she no longer fought it. "If she'll carry the sand, she'll carry us," Paul concluded. And so it was. By the time frost came, they were riding her bareback with nothing but a single come-along rope made of Wickie. "Phantom just won't take a metal bit in her mouth," Paul explained to Grandpa one evening as he and Maureen stood watching him trim one of the pony's hooves. "Great jumping mullets," Grandpa exploded. "This pinto's forefeet has growed out so far I'm going to need my old-timey razor aside my snips. Maureen, you go get my razor. Now what'd you say about Phantom?" Grandpa asked as he waited. "She just won't take a metal bit," Paul repeated. "We're still using the old Wickie for bit and bridle both." "Well, ain't she traveling where you want her to?" Grandpa asked, turning around to look at Paul. Oh, yes, we just lean the way we want to go and lay the Wickie over her neck. Well, what more do you want? Nothing, Grandpa. Nothing at all. Maureen and we thought you'd be ashamed of us for not doing the job right on our own pony. Ashamed? Bellowed Grandpa, straightening up and rubbing both ears. I'm so dang proud it's a wonder I ain't busted my suspender straps. Name me 2 other kids as gentled a 3-year-old wild mare. Maureen came running with the razor. Walk, commanded Grandpa. How often do ye got to be told that if you want to live to be a grown-up, you should never run with anything as sharp as my old-timey razor? Grandpa says it's all right, Paul told Maureen. Phantom doesn't ever need to know a metal bit. Not ever? Asked Maureen. Not ever, repeated Grandpa, as he wielded the razor in an expert manner. I reckon she'll be happier without ever knowing one.